Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon's event, Vientiane Calling, which is already a very good name to allude to what we will be discussing today. We know it's been a very, very full day, but we're glad you're all here. My name is Julia Ebel. I am a counselor at the Permanent Mission of Austria, and also a gender focal point together with my colleague from Cameroon in the Convention on Cluster Munitions. We are glad to convene you this afternoon to discuss the latest work we are doing from the last Lausanne Action Plan on the Convention of Cluster Munitions, that it is in its final year of implementation, and we are looking ahead to preparing the action plan, the Vientiane Action Plan, for the third review conference of the convention to be held in Lao PDR this September. Since we only have 1 hour to cover a lot of ground, and some of our distinguished panelists are also pressed in time, I would like to give the word of welcome to Ambassador Dawi Wongsai, the ambassador of Lao PDR and chairman of the third review conference of the convention. And I will already say he will have to leave us around 4:45, but we're very glad to have him and his support for this event as well. So Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Julia, for the opportunity. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to join you today on behalf of the presidency of the Third Review Conference of the state parties to the Convention on Cluster Munition. At the outset, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to UNIDIA, as well as to the gender focal points of the Convention, Austria and Cameroon, for convening this timely and important discussion on strengthening inclusive and effective implementation of the Convention. We meet at a critical moment as we approach the third review conference in Vientiane. We are also entering the final year of the implementation of the Lausanne Action Plan. This provides a valuable opportunity not only to take stock of progress, but also to reflect on how we can collectively advance the implementation in a more inclusive, responsive, and effective manner. The commitments set out in the Lausanne Action Plan represent a significant step forward. They reaffirm that implementation of the Convention must be inclusive, gender-sensitive, and attentive to the diverse needs and experiences of affected populations. This is not an abstract aspiration. It is fundamental to achieving meaningful and lasting impact. Cluster munition contamination affects women, men, girls, and boys differently, and disproportionately affects persons with disabilities and marginalized communities. While progress has been made, important gaps remain in translating these commitments into consistent practice. In this context, the presidency has placed particular emphasis on listening to perspectives from the field. Earlier today, we convened a side event in the support of the GICSD and CCM Implementation Support Unit entitled From Policy to Practice, Lesson from the Implementation of the Commitments under the Convention on Cluster Munition. The discussion sought to better understand operational reality and to ensure that the next action plan is grounded in the needs and experience of those working directly in affected contexts. Inclusive implementation is not an optional add-on. It is central to the effectiveness, credibility, and sustainability of the Convention. This is why discussions such as today's are so valuable. The new report by the UNIDIR provides an important contribution to our collective understanding. It helps identify good practices, highlights persistent challenges, and points to areas where further efforts are required. Looking ahead to the third review conference, the presidency remains firmly committed to ensuring that inclusivity remains at the heart of our collective work. The next action plan, called Vientiane Capital Action Plan, will be a key opportunity to build on lessons learned, strengthen implementation, and reinforce our shared commitment to a convention that delivers for all affected people and communities. With that, I thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for already setting the scene for our event this afternoon. And I will now give the floor to Ms. Hannah Salama, who will present the research by UNIDIR and the report done that contributes to the effort of offering an overview of the implementation of the action points of the Lausanne Action Plan, covering gender diversity and inclusion. So, Hannah, I give you the floor.
Thanks, Julia, and thank you to Austria, Cameroon, and Laos for hosting this event with us and for the ambassador to be here with us. We know it's a very busy day, so we're very grateful. And on my part, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah, and I'm a researcher at UNIDIR's Integrated Approaches program, and I am one of the authors of the publications that we are launching today. So, Vientiane, Calling, Strengthening the Inclusive Implementation of the Convention on Cluster Munition. So for my brief presentation, I wanted to introduce to you this new publication and also why gender and diversity considerations matter when we're implementing the Cluster Munition Convention, but also more generally to mine action. So first, as many of you may know, in 2022, the CCM state parties have agreed to an action plan known as the Lausanne Action Plan. And in this plan, state parties committed to a number of practical steps that integrate gender and diversity perspectives into all aspects of mine action and programming. So, as you know, these plans are generally 4 years, and this is the final year of the Lausanne Action Plan implementation. So the team at UNIDIR thought that it would be a good moment to assess the impact of gender and diversity related action points and reflect on the way forward, more importantly, on what should be in the new action plan. So this is precisely what we intended to do with this report. We looked at the official reporting from states parties on the implementation of 9 action points that relate to gender, diversity, and inclusion. And through this research, we outlined what areas are progressing and where there were challenges and the need to improve. And this provided us a basis to make recommendations on what should be included in the next action plan and areas where actions and indicators can be more refined and where we can really get a sense of how commitments are being translated on the ground. So for this research, as I said, we looked at official reports. So this is self-reporting from states for 9 action points of the lab. And we also held a consultation with states and other stakeholders, as well as sent out a short survey. So why does gender and diversity matter in the implementation of the Cluster Munition Convention? Well, as you are all well aware, cluster munitions affect women, men, boys, and girls differently. As we heard this morning, in 2024, 314 civilians were killed or injured by cluster munitions across 9 countries. But that's not all. The majority of casualties were male, and children accounted for 42% of casualties from remnants. So where we had sex and age disaggregated data. These gendered impacts can be linked to gender, societal, and economic roles that shape mobility patterns of men and women. For example, it's often men and boys who go work, agricultural jobs or that leave home for economic opportunities, and this really influences their exposure to injury and death by cluster munition remnants. In contrast, women and girls are often considered indirect victims. They're expected to take on caregiving roles and provide financial support for their families if the main provider has been injured or killed. But it's not only gender, it's also age and other diversity factors such as disability, language, or ethnicity that will influence how they will be affected by cluster munitions, but also this will influence how they access risk education, ownership of land, as well as victims' assistance, medical care, mental health, and psychosocial support. So now I wanted to share with you some concrete examples that we gathered from past research on how gender and diversity considerations have been implemented practically and what benefit this has had on the Mine Action pillars, as well as broader consideration such as livelihoods, economic inclusion, and gender equality more broadly. So my first example comes from Jordan, and here the National Committee for Demining and Rehabilitation carried out inclusive consultations on landmine accidents. This information they gathered showed that women, girls, boys, and men had different information based on their daily activities and mobility patterns. So this was obviously used in the planning of survey of clearance. And as I mentioned previously, on explosive ordnance risk education, children, especially boys, face a heightened risk from cluster munitions, and they represent nearly half of the civilian casualties. So this is also due to their mobility patterns. They're often encouraged to take on more risk-taking behavior. And in Afghanistan and Iraq, this led to having gendered and age-tailored approaches to explosive risk ordnance education. So things like child-to-child or child-to-adult risk communication approaches were adopted, and it had more success in these contexts rather than traditional EORE approaches. In Sahelian countries and in Palestine, studies have shown that girl survivors, especially girls with disabilities, are more likely to have little to no opportunity to access education systems and schools even after landmines have been cleared. So this has led to mine action operators to prioritize disability-sensitive assistance and in those countries to ensure that no one is left behind. In Afghanistan, Iraq, and Lao PDR, and Sri Lanka, studies have shown that employment in clearance activities led to an improvement in women's access to resources and services. It changed their ability to make decisions in their own life, in their own family and community, and this resulted in kind of positive changes in social norms, so beyond the mine action sector. So in conclusion, I hope that these examples reflected why gender and diversity should remain a priority, not only because it's the right thing to do and it's what we've been doing, but also because it's the smart thing to do. And I wanted to pass on here the mic to our colleague from UNMAS, Mr. Zed Sukanovic, who is the chief of mine action in South Sudan, and I know that he has a lot of experiences to share with us today on gender and diversity in that context.
And maybe if I can just briefly jump in, I understand the ambassador will have to leave to another appointment. So thank you very much for being with us. And We look forward to Vientiane.
Calling from Vientiane.
Calling from Vientiane. Thank you. Yes, Zed, please. You have the floor now.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, I have to be very quick because I also need to leave before 5. And there is a lot of examples. I mean, mine action is in South Sudan more than 20 years, and huge progress has been made, clearing the minefields, but also clearing the cluster munition contamination. Yet we remain with 9 million square kilometers of cluster munition contamination, or altogether 22 square kilometers of EO threat in South Sudan. Big progress has been made in regards to clearance, but also the big progress has been made in regards to gender mainstreaming and achieving the balance, while we also learned that the balance is not just statistics and the percentage of female operators deployed, but also it's about enabling environment and the continuity in support to female colleagues. As we speak, following the recent conflicts in South Sudan, we have seen since January to date 9 accidents with 18 casualties. And they're all kids. It's 16 boys and 2 girls. 2 of those accidents were related to cluster munition. And statistically, we used to see the cluster munition incidents usually have a big number of victims associated to it. But the statistics on its own tell us that we need to make a different approach to risk education. We are looking at reviewing our risk education material, how the messages are delivered, and we are also going back to discussion to the government and having a risk education included in a school curriculum and training the teachers to deliver this activity. A connection to this is also retailoring the education to parents, specifically mothers of those kids, because the impact of these accidents is related to the family. It affects the family, and at larger scale affects the women. Then gender balance achieved amongst the operational capacity. The inclusion directly has the operational effectiveness. And why? Different groups within the communities hold a different information on contamination based on their roles within the families, within the communities. In South Sudan, deployment of gender balance teams has improved access to communities, strengthened the trust, and enhanced the quality of information that we are collecting. All our teams are structured in a way that we have a clearance capacity, EOD capacity, and there is a EORE and community liaison. Risk education, community liaison teams are mixed, gender mixed, and that is how we are achieving these, the important aspects of having or collecting information from all community members, including the gender parity. In terms of how we are achieving this, I said statistical information, the gender balance on the operational capacity, we included the narrative, the language in our procurement documents, statement of requirements, and we instructed all the bidders to consider at least 30% of operational staff to be females, also to consider percentage of the team leader or leadership personnel within the teams to be female colleagues. And we are monitoring through the project monitoring systems how is this progressing and how it is implemented. And so far we have been seeing even 35–40% of female colleagues being deployed. In support with the National Mine Action Authority, mine action sector, but also in a great support from the GICHD, we met all together, and then we also developed a gender equality, diversity, inclusion policy and the work plan that has been endorsed by the government of South Sudan, and it's in the implementation phase. Segments of the policy have been included or incorporated into the national technical standards and the guidelines, and some of those are also included in our quality management system documents and the procedures. In a continuity with that intervention, then we also supported to form the group of Women in Mine Action network. So it's an opportunity for the female colleagues in a mine action, mainly operational staff working in a field in different conditions, but also encouraging others from other roles across the mine action sector to meet and to discuss about their specific needs, that needs to be addressed in support, and also enabling them to look for the assistance and as in a network to look for the support from all stakeholders that will be interested in giving them such a support. When we speak about the victims, in South Sudan, as an UNMAS, we are maintaining the database about the victims. And unfortunately, the victim support is kind of seeing that downsizing trend. It's not just from UNMAS, but the mine action sector in general. And we used to have some of the NGOs who used to provide that support. There is the need to advocate for stronger victim support, since even if we clear all these threats tomorrow, the victims are going to remain there and they will need our support to continue. As I said, a lot of examples, but the one for the end, so cluster munition clearance plans, the one that we have established and looked at was, I would say, very ambitious, and it has been developed based on the assumption that we're going to have this stable funding. At the time we worked on the plan, that was like nearly 2 years ago, and we set the ambitious targets that we're going to clear the cluster munition threat in South Sudan by 2035. And with the current funding position situation, is look very unrealistic, and we have to go back to our planning table and relook if how this is going to be addressed, unless we get the donors coming back with a stronger support and the government also increasing their support in order to address this. And with that also then inclusion of gender diversity into the plans that we are looking at. So since I will have to leave, I'll be answering the question. If not right now, then you can stop me on the corridor and we can continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Said, for also giving us a realistic picture from the ground of what we are actually talking about when we talk about gender and diversity integration in our activities. I will now give the floor to Renata Dalacqua, also from UNIDER, to speak more on the findings and recommendations of the report. And again, we thank you, Said, very much, and we will stop you on the corridor with more questions for sure.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here today. Renata, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Julia. Let's see if this will work like this. Yes. And thank you everyone for joining us for this launch. So far we've been talking more about the background and why this is important, and we really wanted, someone with experience from the field to actually make these issues a bit more concrete. So we are very appreciative of Unmaz and Zed for taking the time and sharing with us their perspective. Now, I would like to present, everyone must have received this. It's a flyer that has a QR code. If you go to the QR code, you will download the new report. The new report is long, but it has a short executive summary. And that's mainly, what I'll be presenting now. It's what you would find kind of in the executive summary, but if you would like and have more time to go in depth, please read the report and let us know what you think. So as Hannah said, we looked at 9 actions of the Lausanne Action Plan. And these actions, some have one or more indicators, and states have been reporting on the implementation of those actions. Not all states, but a significant number, and based on the reporting that is available, we were able to make some, to infer some conclusions. And overall, throughout the past 4 years, we have seen a positive trend when it comes to gender diversity and inclusion. A positive trend meaning more states are reporting under the selected actions, but in none of the action points we see 100% of implementation. So it is a positive trajectory, but it's still not, what you would see as, 100% of success. So what we see is an increase in the number of states that integrate gender into national work plans and strategies. So in 2022, it was 1. In 2025, it was 12. We see an increase in the number of states saying that they have national laws and policies addressing victim assistance that were developed with the inclusion of cluster munition survivors. That's 6 in 2022 and 9 in 2025. But we have a low number, actually, of states reporting the development of national plans that take into account broader frameworks such as the SDGs when seeking assistance. So only 3 in 2025, and that's actually an increase because before I think it was 0. So maybe this indicates a bit of like a gap in the connecting the dots between broader agendas and cluster munition work. When it comes to gender equality and inclusion in CCM meetings, we have seen increasing number of women delegates in CCM meetings. So the average between 2021 and 2023 was 34% of women delegates and 30% of women heading delegations. There was an improvement in 2024 and 25 where the average became women as 40% of delegates and 32% of heads of delegations. And we also had one woman president in this review cycle, the ambassador of Mexico in 2024. Which is also something that is monitored under the Lausanne Action Plan. Something where we have seen kind of stagnation and low progress is the inclusion of cluster munition survivor as parts of delegations. That's also something that is in the Lausanne Action Plan. And in this past 4 years, what we've seen was 2 instances where states said that they had cluster munition survivors as part of their delegation. When we look into survey and clearance, we also saw an increase in the number of affected states that report including gender and diversity in survey and clearance from 3 to 9 states. But then a low number of states that report humanitarian sustainable development considerations from 0 to 3 in 2025. So again, this gap I feel of maybe at least on the reporting side, maybe at national level things are better, but at the reporting side, we see low level of reporting when it comes to this integration with humanitarian sustainable development. On victim assistance, according to the latest progress report, so this is based on official progress reports that the ISU issues every year. 10 out of 12 states with obligations under Article 5 are providing emergency and continuum medical care to victims. So that is a large proportion, but still we would like to see the 12 states, supporting victims. When it comes to non-discriminatory gender, disability, and age-sensitive assistance, the number is lower, is 8 states. And overall, we also see an increase in the number of states that report having collected, analyzed data disaggregated by gender, age, and disability related to victim assistance from 7 in 2022 to 9 in 2025. Risk education is also where we see, a good progress. 9 of 10 affected states have reported on tailor-made risk education activities, but only 7 of those are providing, gender, age, and disability disaggregated reporting. International cooperation and assistance. So many states, they report participating in international cooperation and assistance. But the annual reports, they actually do not capture if there is, what's the scope and the content of that cooperation and assistance. So we cannot tell by those reports if gender, age, diversity of populations are part of the programs or not. And then transparency and reporting. This is what we learned from the latest progress report issued in 2025, that 63 states parties submitted their 2024 annual reports, and 17 provided information using Form J on gender and diversity of population. So I think this also indicates there is room for improvement in reporting overall. And I think this is something that it's an issue that has been raised by different states parties throughout this cycle as well. So this is kind of, the stock-taking part, the looking back. Our report also has a looking ahead segment where we propose ideas for the new action plan, Vientiane Capital Action Plan. So our overall, as I said, I think states parties, the community of states parties is making progress. And it's a community that is very fortunate because we have also so many stakeholders, operators, NGOs, so on and so forth, that can help with the implementation of this convention. If states would like to go further in the new action plan, they could set specific targets for women's participation. For instance, if we know that we achieve 40%, how about 40% becomes, the floor? That's one idea. Also creating indicator related to women's employment in mine action programs at national level. That's already something that it's possible to report under Form J and could be, reflected in the new action plan. Idea of having, an indicator that talks about design and implementation of projects, including survivors and survivors' organizations. So if we see that having survivors as part of official delegations is very difficult, how about we broaden the scope and try to include survivors' organizations instead? That could be one idea. Include actions to track progress, integrating other considerations beyond gender and age, as well as disability, ethnicity, displacement status, language diversity, international policy standards, and operational practices. Another idea for international cooperation and assistance, as we said, would be to improve the indicators in a way that they actually can capture if gender, age, disability sensitive criteria are part of the cooperation and assistance programs. We also thought, if we want to be ambitious, look at post-clearance. Is there a way that we could address land release? If we can look at productive projects that are, supported and implemented by women after land is released. Also, operational guidance on how to conduct gender analysis and gender-sensitive post-land allocation. Maybe this is something that doesn't need to be in the action plan. Maybe this is something, that a donor country would like to fund the development, or, something that states can come together and develop this with UNMAS or something. So just some ideas of, how to organize and structure action looking ahead. And then synergies with women, peace and security and youth peace and security agenda. The CCM is actually one of the few, maybe the only, arms control and disarmament treaty that mentions Resolution 1325 in its preamble, resolution on women, peace and security. It also mentions the Security Council resolution on children and armed conflict. So I think this shows that, negotiators were aware of the synergies. So it would be something, within the scope of the preamble and the intentions and the objectives of the CCM to actually advance this work. So there could be an indicator addressing synergies between CCM and the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And our suggestion is that such indicator could be very specific, something like number of states parties that include mine action related goals in their national action plans on women, peace and security, for instance, or states that align victim assistance programs with women, peace and security. That's kind of how it is in the CM REAP action plan of the APMBC. And why is it important to be specific? The Lausanne Action Plan has Action 8 which is one action that talks about synergies with a range of areas. Humanitarian, sustainable development, so on and so forth. Like, it's an action that lists a number of areas. And the reporting is also where the indicator is very generic. Report if you have integrated those considerations. And the reporting has been very low under that action. So the reporting, I think, has been 0 for the first 3 years and then increased a bit last year. So I think this shows that this kind of general approach is not the most productive, because also it doesn't offer much guidance. I think we can see the indicators a bit as guidance of how to implement the action. So if we have more specific indicators, maybe that serves as guide. This is just a hypothesis, but I think it's something to consider. And then on youth, also I think CCM already does engagement with youth. There is also the youth competition, there are the youth mine action fellows that come, but there could be something where states parties are, maybe as part of international cooperation and assistance as well, supporting youth organizations in affected countries, or youth organizations more generally. It's just that it feels timely. The Youth, Peace and Security Agenda just completed 10 years, and we have seen this more push to, renew and bring fresh perspectives to arms control and disarmament. So that could be an opportunity for doing so. With that, I'll stop, say thank you, and say that we're very happy to answer any questions and comments you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Renata, for giving such concrete and specific ideas on the way forward. We now have almost 20 minutes for a Q&A session to maybe dive further into some of the topics. And while you still consider your questions, I will already ask our colleague Paul from Cameroon to join us on the panel, so we re-establish the gender balance we had at the beginning. So we will make some space. And I will open the floor now for the participants in the room, and I would ask that if you have a question, please raise your hand. We don't have any flags in here. And briefly state your affiliation and your name when you take a question. Do we have anyone who has already a first question? I see in the back. Yes, please, Tamar.
Hi, Tamar Gabelnick, ICBL CMC. Thanks for all the presentations. Actually, it was just a little comment, and maybe too in the weeds, but that's how my brain works, in terms of preparing for the Vientiane action plan and talking about meaningful participation. It's at this point on the conference level, because I think when we talk about participation, we also need to focus on ensuring that it happens at the national level, at all levels, and across the spectrum, not just at a one-time consultation, but throughout the process of developing projects or programs and implementing and evaluating them. But just in terms of meeting participation, something you said sort of struck me in terms of measuring the number of survivors that participate, and it's taking into account what states are doing, and that's very good as a sign of their commitment to making sure that survivors come. But we also need to take into consideration survivors that are brought by civil society, including ICBL or CMC, and that is funded actually by states. So, thank you to Austria and many of our other donors in the room that make that possible. And so there will be many other survivors there, and this also brings a little differentiation. We make sure that they're as integrated as possible into the work of civil society at the events, that they're part of our morning meetings, that they are very much feel part of a delegation, and it feels like sometimes that survivors can be brought to these meetings and kind of just, sat behind the delegate and feel a little bit isolated and aren't necessarily even given the floor. And we always, of course, make sure that as many statements as possible are given by survivors when they want to. So just thinking about, again, that's pretty much in the weeds, but thinking about what it means beyond the simple word of participation or attendance in a meeting to be fully integrated, and that it could come in different forms. Thanks.
Thank you, Tamar, for giving us something to think about as well when we draft documents. It's not always the states parties. We have a whole bunch of stakeholders working on the implementation of this important convention. We would try to maybe collect a few also comments and questions before I give the floor back to our panel. Someone else, yes, please, sir, you have the floor.
My name is Daisuke Sagiya. I'm working with UX Lao in Lao PDR in collaboration with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. And from my experience, especially in practice, many survivors face long-term challenges that extend beyond immediate assistance and require sustained inclusion in national systems, particularly in areas such as healthcare, rehabilitation, livelihoods, and social protection. Then, while victim assistance is well recognized under the Convention on Cluster Munitions, we observe that it is still frequently implemented in a project-based manner, rather than being fully integrated into national disability frameworks and services. So in this context, I'd like to ask, from a policy and systems perspectives, what are the most effective approaches for countries to better integrate victim assistance into national disability policies and social protection systems in order to move from fragmented project-based support to more sustainable and inclusive model? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further burning questions in the room? If not, maybe I would like to add one question from my side, because we have heard from Zed, and it's something we always talk about when we talk about gender and diversity perspectives. We mostly mention risk education and victim assistance, but you have given some examples on survey and clearance as well, and how this actually is important for the whole range of activities we do when we talk about implementation of the convention. So I would like to ask you what factors maybe you have found through your research that explain this focus, and which factors have contributed to strengthening the integration of gender perspectives and diversity perspectives into all the work we do. And I will give you the floor to answer and react to some of the questions, and then we maybe have time for another round. Thanks.
These are very good questions, and we'll try our best to answer. But actually, they deserve their own research project. So I'm taking notes because these are very inspiring questions. So on Tamar's point about survivors participating as part of civil society and how that is super meaningful as well, I'm thinking from the point of view of how to bring this into the next action plan. There could be something about states parties supporting the participation of survivors, not necessarily as delegates, but supporting their participation and the participation of survivors' organizations in meetings. And for instance, if Austria is supporting, Austria could report, yes, we did. So I think there is a very practical, objective way of doing so in reflecting this in the National Action Plan, and also that would serve in the Vientiane action plan, and that would serve to encourage other states for doing so as well. I think that's one way of seeing the action plan, because we had a discussion earlier in March where we presented preliminary findings, and Dominique actually said something that I found very insightful, as always, Dom, that action plans communicate priorities. And I think that's something for us to keep in mind. Sometimes you think like, oh, this is just a paper, it stays there, it's words on paper, doesn't matter. But no, they actually communicate priorities. And you can look at indicators as guidance as well of how to implement those priorities. So I think that's a way of see the value of these documents. And then, so if you would have some concrete indicator about supporting survivors in conferences, regardless if it's a national delegate or not, that is something that could encourage and provide guidance to states who wish to to promote more inclusive approaches to policy making, to multilateral. And then I actually think if I would do another research project, would actually to do interviews with survivors and ask them what meaningful feels to them, you know, and get their experiences participating as part of civil society, participating at national level, participating, you know, in multilateral conferences. So I think that's a project proposal that I'll start writing. And then going to Julia's question about risk education and victim assistance, that's usually where we see the biggest numbers of, you know, like affected countries implementing a gender and age sensitive approach. And I think that's where you see the human face of this convention more easily. Risk education and victim assistance. And the human face has age and gender. So I think maybe that's why it's easier to see it there. But there are other considerations, as we show in all pillars of implementation, that are relevant as well. I think employment is also something where we have seen a lot of good progress, both at national, both in terms of operators, but also in the conference rooms. And actually, the statistics that we shared, the improvement in women delegates in the past 2 years in CCM is not only in CCM, is across the board in arms control and disarmament. We have seen a big leap in the past 2 years in terms of women delegates, which now is an average of 40% from 2022, when it was 34%. So I think, I don't know, I'm an optimist, so I see these things and I feel, okay, there is some progress, there are good things happening as well. But then we had some very tough questions, Hannah. Do you want to?
Thanks for the tough questions. No, I mean, I'd like to just reflect, maybe not provide any definitive answers, but just reflect on, you know, working my way from Julia's question on what are the factors that influence the implementation of gender considerations. So I think in different areas it will be different, but the first thing is the political prioritization, I think, is a very important factor. And, you know, this is like, what this translates is, for example, Laos theadership in supporting gender events and gender considerations at the political level, but actually doing the implementation in their own country. And I think that making the argument that it is also the smart thing to do, and especially these days when I was listening to Zed speak about the financial constraints that are now faced everywhere, but in South Sudan, and especially on victims' assistance, I think we do need to make the argument that gender and diversity considerations is having big bang for your buck. So it's really improving the impact in victims' assistance, in livelihoods and economic inclusion and employment. So as I referred to before, you know, you employ one woman or you employ one man, okay, that person's employed, they will feed a family, but women are more likely to also feed, you know, their extended family and also be involved in the community. So the impact there is greater. On disability inclusion, I think it's a great question. I think that in the actual text, you know, the disability inclusion and victims assistance should be non-discriminatory. So by definition, it should include everyone and include a systematic approach. And I think there's some language there about the rights-based approach, so the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, engaging this convention and those who implement this convention on the issue of CCM and victims assistance and disability inclusion, I think could be a great way at our level here in Geneva to start thinking about the systems approach to disability policies and sort of make sure it's mainstreamed from, you know, across the board. And then finally to Tamar, yes, we need to have more meaningful participation of survivors. And it just made me think of, UN Women has this framework about what is meaningful participation of women. What does that look like? So first, women need to have the right information. They need to be at the right place at the right time, and they need the right contacts, and they need to be empowered to speak or act. And I think we can apply this to survivors too. So I think the work that ICBL is doing is definitely the right approach. And more research on this topic could also, illuminate maybe perhaps more pathways. So yeah, I sorry that I could not provide, definitive answers, but some food for thought throughout these next days.
Yeah, if I may add just on the question from UXO Lao, JICA, I think this idea of having a systems perspective instead of project by project is super important. I just wonder, the countries that are affected by these issues, sometimes they are experiencing conflict or coming out of conflict. It can be a bit kind of unstable conditions. So it would be good if we could find one good example that we could document and study and actually showcase. So we can continue this conversation afterwards. But again, we are a research institute, so we're always trying to think if at least we would find one or two very good examples, maybe we could draw some lessons.
Thank you very much for taking the time to really answer the question. I wanted to make a short remark on the question of victim assistance and integration into national frameworks. That's an issue for our colleagues from the victim assistance committees in both the CCM and the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention, and I can assure you that together with the ISUs of both conventions, discussions are also ongoing with the committee of the CRPD, and how to, and as well as the CCW, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, Protocol 5, that looks at victim assistance. So work is ongoing there, so maybe the conversation will need to be continued. I see we have more questions. We'll make a quick final round because we are already passing a long time. No, please, Dom.
Yeah,
Ask
okay.
your question.
It's more just a comment, and thanks so much for the paper and for this event. I think it's always difficult, with very high level indicators to see, to get the details out of them. But it does show progress in the right direction, which is really positive. I just wanted to say. Sorry, I'm Dominic Woolsey from GICHD, and we're currently co-chairing the Gender and Diversity in Mine Action Working Group. So that's 14 organizations between civil society organizations. UNIDIR is also a observer. And just to say, in preparation for the Vientiane Capital Action Plan, we are very much ready to input into that process and provide our view on why what makes sense operationally in terms of gender and diversity mainstreaming at this policy level from the perspective of operators and civil society organizations. So that's just reaching out to to the presidency and to others, just to make the case that when invited, we are very much ready and willing to help contribute to that process. Thanks.
Thank you for these encouraging words of support as well. As time has passed on, I will give the floor to my colleague Paul from Cameroon as another coordinator and gender focal point of the convention to close our event today. Please, Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Julia. Let me begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to the other co-organizer of this timely and important event alongside Cameroon, namely Austria and UNIDIR, for bringing us together today around such a critical dimension of the Convention's implementation. I would also like to commend UNIDIR for the quality and depth of the research presented. The Vientiane Calling Report provides not only a rigorous assessment on progress made under the Lausanne Action Plan, but also a clear and forward-looking reflection on where further efforts are needed. This type of evidence-based analysis is essential as we collectively prepare the next phase of implementation. What emerged very clearly from today's discussions is that we are not longer at the stage of questioning the relevance of gender and diversity consideration in the Convention. The debate is clearly beyond us. The real question before us now is one of implementation. How do we ensure that these considerations are meaningfully, consistently, and effectively integrated across all pillars of the Convention? We have heard that progress has been tangible in certain areas, notably in risk education and victim assistance, where proximity to affected communities has naturally driven more inclusive approaches. But we have also heard quite candidly that important gaps remains, in particular in the integration of gender and diversity consideration appears less systematic in areas such as survey and clearance, as well as in international cooperation and assistance. This is not a failure. This is a signal that we must move from commitment to operationalization, from intention to practice, from principles to measurable impact. Another key takeaway from today's discussion relates to reporting. If we are to make meaningful progress, we must ensure that our reporting mechanism, including under Article 7, more accurately reflect the realities on the ground. Because what is not captured is not measured, and what is not measured cannot be effectively improved. Looking ahead, the third review conference in Vientiane, we have a unique opportunity, an opportunity to consolidate what works, but also an opportunity to address what does not work, and to shape a Vientiane action plan that is not only ambitious, but also practical, measurable, and adaptable to national context. From the perspective of my country, Cameroon, and in our capacity as gender focal point, we believe that the way forward lies in a balanced and pragmatic approach, one that supports state parties in integrating gender and diversity consideration, not as an end in themselves, but as a means to enhance the effectiveness, inclusivity, and sustainability of implementation. This includes strengthening national ownership, improving data and reporting, and ensuring that cooperation and assistance mechanisms are responsive to the realities and priorities of states, including through concrete cooperation and assistance initiatives currently being explored. Let me conclude by seizing this opportunity to reaffirm Cameroon's commitment to working closely with all partners, state parties, international organizations, and civil society to advance this shared agenda